So welcome to our webinar today, where we'll be looking at racial equity movements led by parents. And we'll be featuring Greater Rochester PLTI, OLE, Parents for Public Schools, and WASA Parent Ambassadors. And this is hosted by the NYU Metro Center. And I am a part of that. I'm Dr. Wendy Perez, and I help to lead this project. And wanted to tell you a little bit about the purposes of the project before we go into our amazing panel. So our project is funded by the WK Kellogg Foundation. And what it is, it was a 2-year commitment by all the organizations that you'll hear from today to join a racial equity peer learning and inquiry community of practice. So we met monthly to discuss what they were doing, to encourage each other, and even sometimes and outside of that time as well. And each organization chose an issue to address in their area. They decided on research questions that they wanted to reflect on during their actions. They collected information through, it could be conversations, focus groups, and then they developed recommendations based on some of their key findings that they had. And so all of this information will be released in the form of case studies. So if you're interested in learning more about those case studies, please look at the chat. Well, there should be a link provided for the Metro Center link serve. So we would love for you to read some and hear back from you. And now I wanted to introduce our panel. So we have from Greater Rochester Parent Leadership Training Institute, Elizabeth Maxwell and Luva Alvarez. From OLE, we have Merlene Gallegos and Martha Gamboa from Organizers in the Land of Enchantment. And then we have Tanya Marsaw and Shawnee Cooley from Parents for Public Schools on our panel, and Natasha Fecto-Minger and April Messenger from WASA Parent Ambassadors as well. And it will be moderated by Dr. Danielle Perry and Ann Henderson. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and we can hand it over to my colleague, Danielle, Dr. Danielle Perry.
Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Perry, and I am a Senior Research Associate at the NYU Metro Center. We are going to have some really amazing discussions with our panelists, and then we will have an opportunity for you all to engage with the panelists and ask questions. But before we get started, I want to show you a quick 4-minute video that highlights some of the amazing work that the panelists have begun and will give you an introduction to better understand why they are engaged in this equity work. A Journey Toward Racial Equity. Key learnings from the Kellogg Racial Equity Peer Learning Community. In January 2021, the NYU Metro Center launched a peer learning community for parents, staff, and community leaders to advance their work on racial equity. Funded by the WK Kellogg Foundation, the peer learning community is a partnership with 4 parent leadership organizations across the US, including Greater Rochester, New York Parent Leadership Training Institute, also known as PLTI. Organizers in the Land of Enchantment in New Mexico, also known as OLE. Parents for Public Schools in Mississippi, also known as PPS, and the Washington State Association, WSA, Parent Ambassadors, also known as PA. Together, as a peer learning community, we began this work by thinking deeply about the meaning of racial equity and how it could transform communities. We started by asking the critical question, what does racial equity mean to you?
I want to do this work for the children in Mississippi because of our history, to try to give them a better future.
Racial inequity is still at the forefront of many things in our state. And I work primarily for children with disabilities, so there's an inequity for them as well. So all of this kind of ties together in one big, broad-reaching project for me.
I think that the reason I do this work is because of the children and the families that we work so closely with, and seeing all the inequities that are really going on around them and their families.
My inspiration definitely is, are the children and parents of the state.
I do this work for the parents and children and families that we work with and serve, but also for my own children and my immediate community and my nieces and nephews that I want to see grow up in a better and more just world.
I have a 16-year-old son who walks out the door every day in a hoodie and walks into the world in a free and easy way. And my friends who are mothers who have Black and brown children that, you know, walk out the door in a hoodie could not feel as safe. And it just hit me in a more profound way, all the numbers of differences, and made me want to fight that much harder to find a way to make things change.
My inspiration is the same as others. I have two African-American males that I've raised as well, and I want to be able to advocate for other children just as well as I have for them.
My inspiration for doing equity work, first and foremost, is my daughter, who is still in public educational school, and it's the experience of the inequity that I see and have seen in my local school district. And I want to make sure that every student that goes to the school or in our school district have the support they need to be successful.
I want to do this work with others in order that we might actually prevent what we constantly see as a daily going on, the fact that they are Black and brown and for whatever reason are seen as a threat, and the same level of mitigation and de-escalation that has taken place and others who are white does not occur for them. So many people have been able to go home safely, or even if they were arrested, to go to jail fully alive and well. And I just want us to get to a place where that level of well-being in care is given across all systems, and that people can not only live and survive, but they can thrive.
While each member and organization had their own inspiration to strive towards racial equity, we each agreed that moving toward the vision of racial justice meant intentionally eliminating racial disparities and improving outcomes for everyone. So after watching that video, you kind of have a brief introduction to some of our panelists and the organizations that they come from. And now I just want to open the floor and introduce our panelists. I'm going to hand it over to Ann Henderson, who's going to kick off our panel.
Thank you, Danielle, and welcome everybody. What we want to do now is help you understand a little bit better who these wonderful people are who've been doing this work. And so I want to hand it over to Luva at Greater Rochester PLTI. Tell us a little bit more about you and what brought you to this work, Luva. Yes, do unmute yourselves.
Good evening, everyone. As Kate mentioned, my name is Luba Alvarez. I am a parent leader here in the Greater Rochester area. I have 3 beautiful scholars whom I'm very proud of. I'm also an interim director of the Greater Rochester PLTI. What brought me to this work is my children. The need for my children to have representation is very important to me. It is important that we have equality across the systems that we have here in Rochester. And so with that being said, I want to be able to make change, and being part of this work that we're doing allows me to have a voice in that. So that's who I am.
Thank you, Luva. And Elizabeth Maxwell.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Maxwell. I am a parent leader in Rochester, New York, well, in the Greater Rochester area, and with PLTI. My children brought me to this work as well, like many others, to see injustices and understand difference while attempting to make changes for the better for their future.
Thank you very much. And let's go down to New Mexico and to Ole. Martha?
Hello, my name is Marta Gamboa. I'm a early educator from New Mexico, and what brought me to this was that I saw the necessity of having something to do with the children education at a very early age, and parents to get more involved, and also to have our language to speak up here in New Mexico, which is Spanish. That's the second one from English.
Oh, thank you, Martha. And Merlina Gallegos.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Merlin Gallegos. Estoy con la organización OLE. Soy madre de familia de 4 niños inmigrantes. Y lo que me trajo a este trabajo es la pasión por hacer un cambio que permanezca en nuestra comunidad y ayudar a más familias, madres y comunidad inmigrante en general. Gracias.
Oh, thank you, Merlina. Now let's go over to Mississippi. Tanya Marsaw, tell us what brought you to this work.
Greeting everyone. And like so many others have said, what brought them to this work were their children. And same for me. First, let me introduce myself. I'm sorry. Tanya Marsaw from Parents for Public School, parent leader. What really brought me to this work was it was an opportunity to gain knowledge about racial equity and to take that knowledge to be able to enhance my voice to be even a bigger advocate for those who felt like, you know, they had a hard time speaking out about the disparities in our school district. So I plan on using this information to try to help open our school district leader eyes to restructure some of our policies and give our kids the same resources, because my daughter herself has actually experienced the disparities personally. So I'm hoping it to make it equal for all our students in our district. If my daughter benefit, I know every student will benefit as well as our community.
Your commitment's contagious, Tanya. And Shani Cooley.
Hi, Shani Cooley from Parents for Public Schools National Office in Jackson, Mississippi. So my work with our organization began with volunteering to go through our Parent Leadership Institute training at that time. And because of my children, and I wanted to make a difference in my children's school, and learned early on that it wasn't just my children's school that I needed to make an impact on. I needed to make an impact on the schools in the district, all the schools in the district, and the state. And then I started working for National and learned that we need to take this everywhere. So it's a passion of mine to make sure our children get what they need and our parents understand the importance of making sure our children get what they need.
Oh, Shani, thank you. And now let's go over to Washington State, to the parent ambassadors. April.
Hi, everybody. I'm April Messenger. I'm the Director of Family Engagement and Advocacy for the Washington State Parent Ambassador Program. And I came to this work as a Parent Ambassador alumni, promoted, I guess I would say, into the position of director for the first full-time staff position in 2020. I took on this role 2 months before the pandemic shut down the entire world, and a few months before the murder of George Floyd. Shortly before that, we were starting a new cohort of parents, and it became clear that while our program has always focused on racial equity and has always had learning and teaching and growing, we really needed to shift and really prioritize the work we were doing to show that we were an anti-racist organization and working on inclusion and doing the best we could to walk our talk. And so I came to it by osmosis of being in the space. But this opportunity really gave us a lens to reflect and look at our own biases and our own processes and our own ways that we were walking with parents, and really change how we were doing that. So that's how I came to this work.
Thank you, April. And Natasha?
I am Natasha. I'm also a parent ambassador alumni. So I'm Alaska Native Aleut, and my son is also Hispanic and S'Klallam. And I have 4 children in my life that live in my heart. And all 4 of them are melanated to some degree or another. And what I realized is how much the color of their skin was going to impact their ability to receive opportunities, would impact so much of their life, and that it was my responsibility to help them navigate what that looked like. And that made me hungry to learn how to do that, and how to learn about racial equity and how to fight racism. And I was frustrated because there are so few opportunities for us to learn and grow in those areas. So when this opportunity came, and April said we're going to do some work around that, I didn't really know what it was, but I said yes because I knew I wanted in. And so yep, that's how I got here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Natasha. So I've been hearing from all of you a great passion for making things fairer, more just, more open, more inclusive for your own and other children, and really focusing in on the need for us to address racial equity. And I'm going to turn it over now to Danielle for the next series of this panel.
Thank you all for those beautiful responses. And so I want to dig a little deeper into that, kind of who you are and what brought you to this work, to think about how you applied that to what was happening within your organizations and your communities. So I want to hear a little bit about how you advanced racial equity within your organization and within your community over the last 2 years. And I'm going to start with Elizabeth at PLTI.
So in our group, the PLTI group, our core team focused on creating inclusive spaces and seeking parent input from our community to ask what would help succeed in advance equity for bringing more teachers of color to our school districts. Mm-hmm. And in the meetings, we were, informed that there was a lack of communication between the school districts, which created barriers with parents, but also the big lack of representation, especially in our larger districts that have more students of color. And so we've been working to create a better student to teacher pipeline program and working on initiatives with that, also getting parents on hiring committees within our districts.
Great, thank you. So creating more representation and opportunities for parents to be involved, engaged, and share their experiences. Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm going to next go to Martha at Olay.
Oh, hello. My moment of advancing was when, soon, like on the second week, we start seeing this good number of teachers join the meetings. It was like around 15, 20, or sometimes even more. And we saw a lot of participation on these meetings, movements, and especially when they heard that we were going to have interpretation. Before the meetings, they did ask, sending messages, are you going to have interpretation? We say yes. It's when people start joining more and participating in telling their stories, which most of the stories are very, very dramatic or impacted, I want to say impacted. And it was very for me, it was a very happy moment to see them. Finally, they say that finally I'm able to talk, I'm able to say something. And then with time, most others that never did talk in public, even that it was in Zoom, they did talk. Thinking of 2 years of COVID transition, that most of the work was making by Zoom, but still we managed to do something productive with a group of parents.
Thank you, Martha. Really highlighting the importance of creating welcoming and affirming spaces where everyone can actively engage equally is so important in uplifting and valuing everyone's voice and contribution. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to go next to Shani with PPS.
So for us, we've always did our work around equity in our schools, but doing this on this journey, it made us realize that we've never publicly said anything about racial equity. And so with that, our board decided that we needed a equity statement so that people can understand that our purpose is equity always, but we want to lift up diversity, inclusion, equity. So we developed we only have one other public stance against anything, and that's vouchers. So our second public stance is around racial equity, around diversity and equity. So I thought that was a big win for us to actually sit down and drill that out. And thanks, Becky. My cohort is on the line, but she was very vital in getting that done. And we also realized and understand the need to continue to have the conversations around the state.
Thank you, Shani. Such an important move to give power to what you're doing by naming it out loud. So thank you for sharing that experience. And lastly, I'm going to go to Natasha with Parent Ambassadors.
Hi. So our organization, we started by we changed our mission and vision so that it would more clearly reflect our intentional approach to fighting racism. We also paid for intensive racial equity training. We were able to provide racial equity training for about 25 staff or alumni plus the staff. That helped us to be grounded in the same language and the same values so that we could look at our application process. We made very deliberate changes to our application process. We looked at how we chose them, the applicants, why we chose them, and then reflected on our own values and to flush those ideas out so that they could more clearly be, so we could really find them and see what our values were looking like in our applicants. And it took a lot of internal reflection on our part to make sure that we were really seeking, doing that in an equitable way. The other thing we did is we were able to bring those alumni that had attended the racial equity training into the same space. We came together to talk about what we had done and to chart our course moving forward. It was very parent-led, it was all parent-led. And it created this momentum and this excitement, and our alumni are now very solidly grounded in a shared language and a shared understanding as they move forward, and it has really kept our momentum of our alumni going. So it continues.
Great, that's so important, getting that footing where everyone feels like they're starting in a shared space of understanding. Thank you for sharing, Natasha. I'm going to turn it back over to Anne for our next panel question.
Thank you, Danielle. I was so intrigued by hearing how you all presented what you're doing and the enormous focus that you've all had on conversations, making sure you're listening to people, hearing their voices, and giving people who may have felt invisible or unheard that opportunity to speak up and be somebody and really think about this issue. So I'd like to circle back to you all to talk about what you felt was maybe your proudest moment or accomplishment, and maybe a surprise that you had around that. And if you wanted to address a few challenges that you faced, that would be great for us to hear a little bit more about that in your work. And Merlina at Ole.
Ok, mi mayor momento de orgullo fue como hispana poder participar en una organización en la que se incluya más comunidad como yo, más hermanos inmigrantes, profesionales en la primera infancia, porque también soy maestra de educación especial, el poder ir creciendo poco a poco, pero no sola, con los miembros y el equipo que tenemos, con la comunidad que se va integrando con nosotros. Una de las cosas que me sorprendió fue el interés de la comunidad, el sentirse ellos con esa seguridad, con la confianza de permanecer en una organización donde se les da la mano, donde se les escucha. Para mí la verdad fue sorprendente porque es difícil encontrar una organización que te entienda en tu lengua, que valore tu cultura y que te incluya de una manera tan familiar. Uno de mis desafíos fue que después de la pandemia que vivimos, fue algo difícil volver a reintegrar a la comunidad, otra vez a la normalidad y volver a escucharlos, a unirlos otra vez a las organizaciones, a enseñarles recursos. Ese fue uno de los desafíos yo creo que enfrenté, y la tecnología también, poderles ayudar con eso. Gracias.
Well, thank you, Merlina. I appreciate your honesty and your authenticity about that. And April, Parent Ambassadors, what was your moment of accomplishment and surprise perhaps, and some challenges?
I think for me, my biggest accomplishment and the thing that I'm most proud of is the development of our mission and vision statement. We spent a lot of time in community getting feedback from all of our alumni in various modes. So it was done through phone calls and social media and meetings face-to-face and Zoom meetings where we really talked about what was important to us and what our values were and what we were doing and how we wanted to show up as an organization. And it was led by the parents. And so it was created for them, by them, and for the parents that are coming behind them. And I think that the most beautiful thing was we were doing this as this kind of side project of parent ambassadors. And our parent organization is WASA, and where a lot of our things are aligned and a lot of the things we do together, they saw what we were doing and took the initiative to update their mission and vision as well. So we were, in a sense, mentoring up, and it was the parents that took that first big step and said, we need to say that we are an anti-racist organization. We need to demonstrate these things so that when people apply, they know what they're signing up for, and that we get those with intention who want to do the work, not just because they, want to have the parent ambassador name next to what they do. And so watching our board and our parent organization then go through kind of the same process was really valuable. And now they're doing their own anti-racist work in a more intentional way. So that makes me very proud. And I think, you know, one of the challenges that we faced, even though we have the amazing opportunity of being on Zoom and being able to have it be more convenient at your fingertips, it's still not. It's still challenging to find that sweet spot that works for parents gathering. You know, parents still have to work. They still have to provide for their families. And even though you might do a Zoom at 7 o'clock at night, it's a lot. So I think the balance of meeting a deliverable in a grant and getting the real actual time that we wanted to take to have some of these conversations was challenging. So those are I think my two challenge and success.
Thank you. That's a great description of parent leadership in action and its ripple effects. So Luva, what do you want to tell us about PLTI in terms of your accomplishments and surprises?
So thank you, Kate. So for us, I think one of our proudest moments was when we were able to go into a local district here in Monroe County, which is part of Rochester, New York, and do a presentation to share more about data of data that was we wanted to share with them about teacher diversity. From that presentation, we were able to have another meeting with that district and then begin to have discussions with them of the importance of having possibly parents on their hiring committees to help along the way to hire teachers and also administrators. And we thought that it would be a value to have diverse parents on those committees. And with that, since those conversations came about, we were able to make that happen. So for us, that was a proud moment because we were able to get 10 parents from the local school districts, local schools, excuse me, in this area that were able to sit on committees that were hiring for principals and they were hiring for teachers. And what that did for parents is obviously empower them. It also helped the district as well to understand how parents see things and how they view things, and how when they ask questions, the specific questions that they ask these administrators and teachers that allow them to see things outside of the box. And so with that was a proud moment for us. We felt like that was the beginning of a great relationship and partnership within the school district. And then that began to open more doors for more opportunities for our parents to stay engaged, to be empowered, and also to have that voice at that table. Now, obviously, you know, they're not going to make the final decisions, but they were able to sit on the first two tables to help along the way. Some things that is challenging was that, you know, not everybody thought it was of value to have a parent voice on those committees, right? They didn't see the purpose of it. They didn't understand why we needed to, but obviously as parents, we should have we're stakeholders, and we should have voices on those tables because it is our children that are going to those schools, and it is our children that the administrators are teaching or looking at all day long. So why wouldn't you want a stakeholder like us to be on that committee? So that was a little challenging, but to say the least, the district did continue to work with us collaboratively for that year. And it was a nice feeling to see the end results. And we were able to even have a conversation with the superintendent and have a debrief meeting with the superintendent and those parents to share out how that felt and how that looked. And what that could be done for the future opportunities of hiring, you know, committees within the district throughout the year. And then surprisingly, I think what was surprising too was that other districts don't have hiring committees the way this district had it set up. And so our thought process was to go in and see how we could get to other districts and have the same type of conversations. And we thought it was really surprising that not everybody was so open to those type of opportunities. But nevertheless, we continue to do the work, and we continue to speak upon it to say that, you know, this is what we feel is another way to get parents engaged and be involved in this work. So that's a little bit of what we did.
Thank you, Luva. You took a big goal of making your teaching force more diverse and inclusive, and you really tackled it. And let's go to PPS and talk to Tanya about what they did to work in their communities to have conversations around this topic.
Okay, I think that my proudest moment was just having the conversation with the focus group, because at that time, in 2016, the political atmosphere changed, groups went their separate ways, and it was all divided in Crystal Springs. So those people that I invited, one person that I invited, I wasn't for sure if she would even show up, because we hadn't spoken since 2016, since the political atmosphere change. But she did show up, she did participate in the focus group. And the reason that we had the reason we hadn't spoke because of difference of opinions as to what our perspective was to the disparity that was in our school district. But I was proud that she did show up and that she wanted to have a conversation about the disparities, about the inequities that we see in our district. It was surprisingly known that everybody had their own idea as to what racial equity was. I mean, if you went around to all the people that was in my group, everybody had a different perspective as to what it was. But we all agreed that, it did mean that we want every child in our schools to have the same resources. Doesn't matter as to what school they went to within our district. I will say that from the focus group, I could tell that my individuals, they love having a conversation, and I think they would like to have more. And so that, we can just start in the conversation, because there was no conversation around race, period, after 2016. So just having that open dialogue between everyone, that was one of my proudest moments. As I said, what surprised me is that we all had our differences as to what it was, but we did come to agreement that we wanted everyone to all our children to have the same resources. And one of the challenges that we did agree on is that we're dealing with a fortress school district. So therefore they denies inequities, they deny the disparities, and they don't see it. We have a lot of out of reality leaders. So we know that we're going to have to continue this fight, and it may not be tomorrow, it may not be next year, it may not be year after next, but because we've been battling it for so long and battling our out of reality leaders for so long, it's going to take us a little bit longer to get things changed, but I am in for the long haul to do the work. So we're going to continue to keep speaking up. We're going to continue to educate our parents and make sure that our community hears us as well as our leaders.
Thank you so much, Tanya. And that was wonderful to hear from all of you. And I think you have every right to be very proud of those accomplishments. Danielle, I'm going to toss it back to you.
Yeah, such great accomplishments to be proud of. I want to talk a little bit about how being a part of a community of practice aided in some of those accomplishments. So I'm going to start with Marlene at Olay.
Sí, claro. Los beneficios de ser de una parte de una comunidad de práctica, en lo personal para mí fue muy grande. El poder agarrar un micrófono en frente de representantes tan importantes de nuestro estado, el poder ir y hablar y abogar por nuestras comunidades. La verdad para mí fue un reto, y fue un reto muy grande que pude dominar, que pude lograr. La otra es poder unir a más miembros de la comunidad, poder decirles los beneficios, sus derechos que tienen aquí, ir creando poco a poco una comunidad equitativa y crecer crecer en el estado. Estamos haciendo historia ahorita a nivel nacional por enmienda número 1 y vamos a seguir haciendo historia por más cambios que estamos tratando de lograr en el estado de Nuevo México. Gracias. Enmienda número 1 para lograr un cuidado infantil equitativo en el estado de Nuevo México.
Thank you, Marlene. No problem, Marcella. Definitely important. I'm hearing the development of policies and really creating active voice. Thank you, Marlene. Natasha?
One of the things I forgot to include in what we did was we were able to take a group of parents down to New Mexico and join in the work that Ole did. And that was super powerful. But when I think about being a part of the community practice, I just want to remind you that I came into this work as a parent, as a person that was starving to learn about how to be anti-racist and how to make change. And that there wasn't space for it. Room for any of that. So I found out about this opportunity and this grant, and I said yes, and I came in. I didn't necessarily know what I was doing, but I did it. And then about halfway through, a position opened up and I was hired. So I'm actually now a parent coordinator for our program. And it has given me like a unique perspective, a lens to look through. I still am participating. I'm alumni, still participating in this as a parent. But I had this perspective of the changes we made to the application and then using the application, knowing what our intent was, and then seeing where the changes that we made fell short. And I could talk about that for quite a while because I'm so fascinated by just the process of like what we were trying to do and then what the result was, and then the fact that we're going to go back and change it. But what I really want to express to you is that deliberately including parent voice in the grant and in the deliverables was so very powerful because there's not enough places for us to learn and to find collaboration in this work. Just regular people on the street that have Black children in their lives or children that are affected by racism. And when they're white or lighter skinned, it's harder to learn how to help them navigate. And that the work that we have done to open up spaces and allow parents in is life-changing, and it allows us to help them to live to their fullest potential, and then gather around like the alumni. It just created so much space. And then I was so inspired by seeing the work done on a national level and learning that like PLTI in Rochester is also, there's PLTI in Washington, and putting that together and going down to New Mexico and working with Ole and seeing how like change can happen and that there's room at the table.
Right. Thank you, Natasha. Making these connections and finding out that there's so many other organizations out there doing the work that you're doing and connecting with them to continue. I want to next go to Luva with PLTI.
So for us, I would say I would echo what Natasha said in reference to it was a great opportunity to really highlight parent voice in this work that we're doing. I think that was really important to have that as the forefront of the conversations and also in leading the work. I also think that the benefits of being part of this community and this community of practice was really an opportunity for us to like network with one another and really connect with each other and learn from each other. That is, for me, that was really important, to learn about Olay and to learn about what's happening there and what they're doing. So I think it was just an opportunity to learn from other people from across the country that you probably would never have had the opportunity to connect with or work with. And I think us coming together on those monthly meetings allow us to hear what other folks are doing in their communities, right? And the work that they're doing and how they're tackling it. And also to hear that, you know, it's challenges too as well, right? And that we are all in this together, but we all facing some of the same challenges across the way to really to make change and the change that we want to see. And I also think it's an opportunity for us to participate and have our voices being heard as well. And I think that's where the parent voices comes in, because this allows parents to share out what they're seeing in their communities. And like what Tanya said, like it allows her to be vocal and share out and give her opinions, and then be able to hear from others, but then be able to know that I'm not doing this alone. I have a group of people who are also doing the same thing too as well. So it just gave a great, for me, I think for our team, it just allowed us to learn from from other folks, and allowed us to know that we're not alone in doing this work. So it was just a great opportunity, or it has been a great opportunity, being engaged in this work together with other folks.
Thank you, Luva. The learnings, definitely. And last, I'm gonna go to Tanya with PPS.
Yes, the benefits of being a part of the community of practice was the peer-to-peer learning that was going on. It was very insightful, always engaging. I love that a space was created to allow us to discuss and talk about what each other was doing, share ideals and methods that everyone was using. I also, I like that I saw it being a collective body of work around different issues, but at the same time, we're focusing on the same issue, although we're doing different type of issues that we are actually working on. It was very encouraging, and it has allowed me, like I said, to be more vocal and how to approach situations differently now, not like I used to do, just head on. I found other methods and other ways to get things moved. So for me, it was the learning strategies, the peer-to-peer learning. I actually loved them.
Thank you, Tanya. I'm so great to hear that this was such a great space for the collective power that you all have discussed. And for our last panel question, I'm going to throw it back to Anne.
Thank you, Danielle. And thank you, everybody, for your just really insightful, interesting responses. I'm thinking about our audience now and what others might want to do to try to do this kind of work. And what would you want other parent leaders or staff of organizations that might want to take this on to know about this work? What do they need to know, be able to do this successfully? And I'm going to throw it out to April at Parent Ambassadors.
I had a feeling you were going to make me go first. I would say, for me, don't be afraid to make mistakes. I think we had an idea of what we thought this project would be, and it completely shifted and morphed the entire length of the project. I think to be patient with yourself and others. Not everyone is in the same space when it comes to being on a racial equity journey. I think when we started, we had a parent that said, I want an agenda for every meeting and what are we going to accomplish? And I had another parent that said, we just need to be in community and this is about relationship. And so being able to meet in the middle and come up with what works for the group, having patience as a leader is key. And not being so tied to those white dominant forms of success. And I think when I think about resources, thinking about honoring the parents' time is first and foremost. Paying them for the times that they show up in the spaces to share their experiences and their knowledge and their power. The other thing I think about that I don't think we've thought about when we applied, were having things like the money to have resources to buy books, to do learning together. So books on racial equity, books written by amazing authors that everyone should read when kind of taking on this community of practice. Thinking about thinking outside of the box of how people learn together. I think our Agents of Change program that we were able to do wasn't something that we ideally or originally thought of, but it organically came up. And so having funds to be flexible to the group when you're thinking about resources, I think are really important. And then the one thing I will say is when thinking about these projects, they need to be more than 1 to 2 years. Like it takes time to build trust and relationships and be in community to actually make change. And so pushing back on funders, pushing back on all of those people who are wanting to have a deliverable of sorts. Be strong in that. Be strong in sticking up for what we actually need to do this work effectively.
Wow, that's really good advice, April. Thank you. Martha at Ole, what would you want other parent leaders and staff to know about how to do this work successfully? What do they need?
Well, like April said, it's time. It will be the key for these reunions. The constantly communication to the parents, to new parents, to strangers. So people sometimes look at us like, but how are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Who's paying you for this? They start asking questions that sometimes I'm like, oh, no, this is for you. This is for you and your children, for the community. With time, members tend to communicate better, participate, and tell their stories of how they came from other countries, how they struggled to speak to teachers, to doctors, how they struggle to communicate with their own children, sometimes because they work a lot. They work sometimes 2 jobs. So these people are, these parents are, they have so much to tell. And when the time comes for them to have a special space like Ole with interpretation, nobody's going to tell them just a minute because we don't understand you. No, it's at the contrary. The ones that speak Spanish speak first, and then we have translation all the time. I remember a member just bursting in tears because she was talking for the first time. She was telling us her feelings as a parent, as a single mother, as how she worked so hard to find a daycare that didn't cost a lot of money. And for her, she thinks the language was the one that stopped her for going forward in many things that she wanted to do. Because a lot of our members, a lot of our mothers, they came with this education from other countries, but the language is the barrier that stops them from keep going, in a better direction.
No,
So,
thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Very helpful. Thank you. Elizabeth Maxwell from Parent Leadership Training Institute in Rochester.
Okay, so what would I want other parent leaders or staff to know about this work? That when you come to the table with a lot of ideas, eventually it becomes very overwhelming. So you have to hone in. Another thing too is that when you're looking to change policies, you have to look at how you're going to hold people or places accountable. Are you able to consistently go in and ensure that that accountability is going to happen with what you're asking for changed in the policy. And if not, realistically, then that's not like the goal that you want to target right then and there, because it's not something you can take to the table. You're not going to be able to keep on top of it. For resources for being successful, it really is honoring the people that you bring in, honoring their time, removing barriers. What does that look like for people? Does it mean childcare? Does it mean providing a meal? Does it mean reimbursing them for dinner? You know, these are the considerations that really have to be taken into focus, because in transportation, is wherever you're holding your meeting accessible to everybody. Do you have enough public transportation if people don't have the transportation to come? And that's, you know, that's where I go with this. But I think that, you know, parent voice is very, very important to making changes and getting people to listen, because once you bring them in and you have more of a collective, you can't continually ignore them from, you know, leadership and lawmakers.
Thank you for that wise and practical advice, Elizabeth. Tanya. From Parents.
Okay, I think what.
You're gonna have the last word here, Tanya.
What I would want other parent leaders or staff to know about how to do this work is to not just stop at having the focus group conversation, but to continue to push others to have the same conversation around their dinner table, so that, you know, that this can continually to go on. So it just doesn't stop at the focus group. Everybody have that conversation around dinner time, lunchtime, or wherever you are stationed. You can just bring it up in conversation. That's what I've been doing. And I want other parents to know that this work is very important. It's tedious here in my local district, so you're going to have to be in there for the long haul, but also want them to know that they can be bold and courageous parent leaders, and to be seen and to be heard, because everybody deserve an opportunity to be seen or be heard. It doesn't matter your socioeconomic background. It doesn't matter where you come from. Your voice is very powerful. There are powers in numbers. So I want them to continue to just have the conversation and not let up off the conversation. Far as resources, I do know there should be some training, because some parents are sort of scared at stepping out and stepping up. So some would need some training as to what racial equity means and how to approach the policies on which they need to advocate on, because sometimes they don't know what they're seeking out, and you need to be able to understand what you're seeking out to change, what laws you're seeking out to change, and just switching up the way that we used to do things, because that hasn't gotten us anywhere. So we need to use a different approach so that it can be an eye opener for everyone, so it can make our community better as well as our schools better.
Tanya, thank you. Thank you all for this really wonderful advice. And I'm struck over and over by how important it is to just have these conversations and bring people in, make them feel they can speak up, understand how important it is to listen to them, because they have so much to say. And when we do that, it's going to be harder and harder for the powers that be to ignore them. So thank you again. And I'm going to toss it back to Danielle so we can have a discussion with our audience and start having some Q&A here.
Okay, everyone. So I want to open it up for questions. I do ask that if you have a question you want to ask for the panelists, please post it in the chat and we will go question by question. So the first question that we have for the panelists is from Deslin Dyer. And it's, how do you communicate with your participants, supporters, and the community about your work? Are there regular emails or regular news blasts?
So I answered in the chat, but I'll say it in case people can't see it. So we did both, and we shared on our social media, and then there's personal contact. So we contacted people we personally know, like Tanya said, she reached out to someone she hadn't talked to since 2016. So it's all of that. It's you share it and you get the word out that this discussion is coming up and that we want everyone to be a part of it.
Yeah, I think for the Greater Rochester PLTI, we use our newsletter as a form of way to communicate and continue have updates. And so we would have members from our core team would write a blog about what has happened so far within a month or 2 months, what we have done, any updates. We also shared it within our social media page. I think that's something that we all do now. We blast it out in there. And then we also share within an alumni group too as well, which also our newsletter goes to, so they could be aware of the work that our organization is doing. And then anyone is interested in becoming part of the work, then they can, also connect with us too as well. But we try our best to really keep the word out by just connecting with people through our newsletters, our social media blasts, and just letting people know that this work is very important. And also networking, most of our core team members we all have some great connections with people in the community. And what we have seen is that we're able to, if we're in a different line of work and somewhere else, we talk about it there. And then that's how we connect with them. And then they bring us into their space too as well. And we talk about it more with that other group. So that's what we do in Rochester.
Such great recommendations for building relationships and sharing your work. Thank you, Shani and Luba. Anyone else have anything to add there?
I would like to say that we did and do a lot of communication with our social media. First of all, we have a great way of communicating in a big group. So when we're going to have a meeting, we just send hundreds of emails or messages. That really works as they answer. We have questions, are you coming? Yes, we usually ask tell the topic of the meeting that we're going to have. And they agree, they make comments, and we can also at the same time, when we answer, we can call also, so we can have one-on-one, which is very important. A lot of these members are new. Constantly, we are having new members, new parents or teachers that see our ads in Facebook, for example. So we get all that people almost every day, 3 days a week. We constantly are calling new people, and a lot of them show up for the meetings. And I think that in their own group, they constantly bring 1 or 2. And so that makes it a big group. They always say, I'm coming because she told me that you guys are having these kind of meetings that I'm very interested in. So that's what we do.
Yes. Thank you, Martha. So I want to move to the next question from Maria Dane, and it's, do you have any insights into the intersectionality of disability and race that changed your community work?
I'll go.
PPM.
Yeah. So one of our parent leaders that worked on the project with us actually works with the special needs. That is her job, and she also has a special needs child that is biracial. So she is our connect to that area in the state of Mississippi. So anytime we have anything that comes up, we connect with that organization to connect with the special needs community. but she works really hard on equity, period. But once she got on this project, she just, decided to make sure that she brought in PPS work into her work. Matter of fact, I'm doing a focus group with her parents next week. The racial equity focus group with her parents some of her parents next week. So they're trying to fold it into the parents of the special needs community that they deal with.
Right.
I just wanted to interject real quick, Danielle, on that. A couple of us on our core group, we were really big advocates and still are for the early intervention childhood education program in New York. And with the intersectionality, you will see the disproportionately affected areas within a county that's served within New York State, and you can drastically see, who's underserved versus who isn't, who waits longer, who doesn't, and then, there's data, but it's old. Like, I think the last time I saw like a regularly published data, it was from 2012. So the programs haven't changed much. There needs to be more advocacy in that area to bring more stuff in, even to the school districts. So, but it requires more voice.
Absolutely. And just as a tip for resources, if you are interested in reading more about intersectionality around disability justice and racial equity, there was just a report published based on findings from Boston Public Schools just about a week or two ago, talking about the inequitable disparities of access to opportunities based on disability status. So that is one resource that just emerged within the last month. Thank you, panelists. Our next question from Malaya Franklin is, what training tools or materials have you found work best on the topic of racial equity? I do see that Natasha answered in the chat that she has learned that all anti-racism progress happens in relationships. And for parent ambassadors, just taking a simple training that allowed them to have a common language and understanding was simply the starting point, and that the real change happens when people engage in difficult conversations with people that they value. And I think that that last statement in particular is just very powerful, that real change happens when people engage in difficult conversations with people that they value. Do any other panelists have something that they would like to add to that question?
So if you're looking for actual training that you can do, we're an anchor partner with Everyday Democracy, and they have a really good diversity training that they do. So I would say reach out to them. They do it everywhere, so wouldn't matter where you go.
Thank you, Shani and Natasha. Our next question is from Deborah Jennings, and they ask, how have any of the orgs organized parents to address issues of inequity in discipline policies and practices, especially related to police and schools?
I feel like I'm answering too much, but hey, Deborah, she's a former board member. I think that was one of our findings so that is something that we'll be looking deeper into addressing. How do we address those policies? We did talk on a couple of the different focus groups a lot about some of the disparities between how the students are disciplined, not just in race, but gender. So that is something that we're going to dig deeper into. to further figure out if there's policies at the school level, if there's policies at the legislative level that needs to change in the state of Mississippi.
Thank you, Shani. Are there other panelists who would like to answer that question? Or other organization members who have more insights of how this work may have happened in your org?
I think I'll just say that we've created a lot of momentum with our alumni. And then as our alumni moves forward and the alumni gather together, their focus then turns into the addressing inequities in public school. And so it was more organic. And those conversations are happening, you know, as a result of the momentum we were able to create with and keep alumni engaged. So I don't know if that helps people.
So I think here from Rochester, we have so many, it's so very complex and so many different things that are happening a lot every day. You know, we have the teacher diversity that we're dealing with. We have the police in the schools. I mean, right now that's very prevalent for us right now in our community. There's been some situations that have occurred. But I think like Natasha said, within our alumni, you know, parents are very driven, you know, to evoke change and be at these seats at the tables. I have a seat at the table to discuss and share. I think even with us doing this teacher diversity, we see a lot of inequities and we see a lot of things, that disparities that we could be working on more and pushing more. And probably part of that policy is working to push the whole issue concern about policing children, because if we want teachers to be diverse, that also has an effect somewhere with that, and how teachers see students when they come sit in their classrooms, right? And how they perceive them and what the behaviors are and how they interpret it. But I think that our alumni, they are working on, they have been in conversations, you know, some of them are more out there pushing it because it affects their own child as well. And others are more like, you know, get into the conversation, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that everybody, a child is not being selected to be suspended or something, just for something simple that does not need to be happening, or being targeted. We don't want that to be occurring. So it's just an ongoing thing that here in Rochester that we have, and we've been working. I think we're working on so many things because it's so complex here, and a lot of things is happening on a daily basis that I could be here on this call all day and share. But I think we're all just, you know, working at different things, and every group of parents is just in making sure that they are involved and they are putting their voice in it so that people can hear them, and then we can push agendas and move things along the way.
Thank you, Luba. And so the last question that I want to pose is, what do white folks, specifically white women, need to know about approaching this work without falling into savior mentality? What's the best advice about walking that thin tightrope of balance when trying to build and maintain relationships with policymakers while also holding them accountable?
I'll piggyback on what Elizabeth put in the chat, but I think listening without the intent to respond is key. I also think that it's important for us to do our own work outside of the work that we do in these positions or in this kind of community of practice. And I think I mentioned before, not being afraid to make mistakes. I think I've learned the number one thing for me on my racial equity journey is perfectionism is dangerous, and it's very white dominant culture, and I struggle with it a lot, and I'm not afraid to admit that, right? Like being open to sharing where we are at in our journeys is important as well. And I think when it comes to talking about, you know, walking the tightrope of balance with policymakers, Natasha mentioned really no anti-racist work happens without relationship. And so it's using those opportunities where you do have relationships to educate, not not discriminate, not berate, not tell someone they're wrong, but really it's about education and conversation. And that's where the shift comes, and that's where the change comes in policymakers. We're fortunate in Washington that we have a lot of people who are newly elected in the last 4 years to really show a lot of representation of our state. We have a lot more people who are moms now, who are people of color, and have that lived experience and are stepping out for us. So as white women doing the work, we need to be allies to those people of color in those positions, to the white policymakers that aren't at the same level. That's what I would say.
Thank you, April. And so that concludes our Q&A section. I want to again thank all of our panelists for sharing their stories, and for all of you for engaging in this conversation with them. I'm going to turn the mic over to Wendy to close us out this evening.
Thank you. Yes, thanks so much. This has been a really rich conversation and dialogue, and we hope that's what we really wanted to do with this webinar, have a dialogue with you all about this work. Wanted to remind you, if you do want, if you're interested in our case studies that will be published from this work, please sign up at the Metro Center listserv. We can put that in the chat again. And I also wanted to share with everyone some of our social media handles right here. And we'll put it in the slideshow so it's a little bit bigger for everyone. But yes, we have, let's see if it's, well, it's not quite, there it is. So you can contact me. I help to lead this project, Wendy Perez, at NYU. You can look at our Twitter for not only this project, other projects that are happening. We also have Greater Rochester PLTI, their email, Facebook page for Ole, email, Twitter handle, a Twitter handle for PPS, WhatsApp and ambassadors, Twitter as well. So that's one way to contact them. But please feel free to reach out to us. We would love to continue the dialogue and speak to you about this work. We will be in this community of practice for another year together. But like folks are saying, the work continues. It's not just about, this grant, the work continues even beyond this grant. So look out for our work and what we're doing, and we would love to hear from you. And please look out, because we also will have a recording for this work. So with that, thank you all, and that concludes our webinar. So look forward to hearing from you all. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great rest of your evening, wherever you are in the country or world. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, beautiful people. Have a great evening.
Thank you all.
Great job.
Bye.